here we go. You know, I love boss fights. I think I've said before that boss fights in video games show off the very best of what a game has to offer. You're showing off all the great aspects of this media in one condensed moment. But there are times where they aren't shown off properly and can end up being the worst part of their game. Those bosses in games that kick your ass with no remorse being one of them. Now I should make something very clear, because there is a very wide gap between bosses being difficult and bosses being bullshit. Because even if a boss wipes you across the floor, you can still get some fun out of it. Only if you're a sadomasochist. Dark Souls or Ninja Gaiden, for example, can be brutal but still enjoyable, unlike Super Mario Bros. The Lost Levels, which is just plain brutal. I define a bullshit boss as using cheap tactics and constant annoying cliches that tighten the difficulty for no reason other than to be a dick. And you'd be surprised how many developers will sacrifice respecting the player's sanity and mental health just to give them a challenge. Hey game devs, wanna know a secret? Nobody likes that! I never got a chance to play Cuphead until late 2018. And one of the main things known about it is that it is a very hard game. That's an understatement. I still remember my first time loading it up. I played the first run and gun level, died over and over again for 30 minutes straight before getting a perfect score? Somehow? And I think that's a pretty good allegory for Cuphead in general. The game seems unbelievably hard at times, but keep plugging away at it and you'll eventually master it. And even if it is hard, you can still get a lot of enjoyment from the amazing jazzy soundtrack and the absolutely outstanding art design. Even the most frustrating boss fights never got me too mad, because it still felt fair for the most part. Because in my opinion, there is one boss that went a little too far. Not Grim Matchstick, not even Rumor Honeybottoms. To be blunt, I fucking hate Dr. Cal's robot. Christ, every other boss I could at least scrape by some fun, but this guy? Oh, just fuck me sideways already. Being at the bottom of this list, there are only one or two things I see problems with. Dr. Cal's robot's biggest problems are his goddamn hitboxes. With almost every other boss in this game, it doesn't matter where you hit them, they're always going to take damage from your shots. But the first phase of this stupid hunk of junk will only take damage in 3 small specific places. And you're not going to know this on your first time through, resulting in most players chiseling away at this thing only to die and see almost zero progress made. Even ignoring the first phase, and the second phase too, that one is actually kind of easy, the third phase makes this game into more of a frickin' bullet hell game than a run and gun platformer. Starting to think it's not worth it. Hey, at least you get to keep your soul at least. Whatever is left of it. Now that I'm making countdowns more frequently, yeah, at least trying to, at some point, I'd love to make one countdown on indie games, so I've been trying to cram as many popular indie games down my gullet as possible. And a little ashamed to admit this, I never played Super Meat Boy until I wanted to make that list. Sad, I know, especially since Super Meat Boy is pretty good. Smooth physics engine, great soundtrack, and like Cuphead, it is difficult, but in a way that it is your fault whenever you die. And you will die a lot in this game. At the time of writing this script, I haven't beaten the game, but I'm pretty sure I've died well over 1,000 times. The bosses in this game are simple but fun. All except for Little Horn. The one boss who is a greater piece of shit than the boss who is actually made out of shit. Where do I begin with this one? There's only one problem with Little Horn, but it sticks out all too easily. Every other boss in this game is a test of skill. One who is skilled enough, with gallons of luck, could probably beat some of these bosses on their first try, while Little Horn is pretty much one big game of Simon Says. The only way to win is by learning the pattern of his attacks. And how, you may ask? By dying over and over and over again. What probably makes this all the more infuriating is that he is just so slow! Just about every other big bad in this game can be over and done within a matter of seconds, but not Littlehorn! This entire fight is just an agonizing, slow, and repeating process of jumping, waiting, and dying until you finally win. All I can do is hope the sequel doesn't have this. At the beginning of 2019, I made a video on games I wanted to see in the future, and it is only now dawning on me that I neglected to talk about how much I would love to see a new Jak game. I love these games. Despite how frustrating they can be, they still remain to be fun. I love the whole trilogy, though I think it's easy to say that Jak 2 is the worst of the three. Not because of the sudden shift in genre, that was for the better. I'm talking about how stupidly difficult the game became. I mean, good lord, it's fun, but the ridiculous amount of dumb challenges and cheap mandatory missions that were put in, why? There are so many time limits and chase missions, and none of them are good. And the final boss is absolutely awful. And I will be taking it personally. You see, Jak 2 introduced Dark Jak, where you become invincible and all-powerful, dashing about killing metalheads with ease. When you start the final boss, you get a monologue about how the villain will rule the world before attacking you, and when Core does attack, you become Dark Jak. When I first played this, I thought this was going to be a boss fight you do entirely as Dark Jak. I mean, it would have been stupid easy, but hell, at least it would have been a stupid amount of fun. Instead, it completely drains you of your dark power and proceeds with the stupid boss fight cliches. Waves of enemies, shitty camera angles as the boss moves to the second phase and chases you around. But what is especially frustrating is the weapon you get. Now, I personally believe the Morph Gun is one of the best weapons in all of gaming. You get 4 modes: a standard rifle, a shotgun, a machine gun, and a goddamn plasma cannon. Guess what one ammo is the only one you get during the boss fight? Yep, standard rifle. Naughty Dog, if you ever do make a Jak game, make sure you keep out all of this noise. So funny enough, one of the days I was working on this script was the November Smash Direct. Oh. Whoops. But this was the first time we got a look at Gleam and his Thanos-like ability to just fucking annihilate everyone. Except Kirby. He will never die. But I bring this up because Gleam reminds us all of a certain nightmare from 2008. I mean, come on, did you really think I could make a list like this and not talk about this freak? Taboo was the bane of Brawl, aside from tripping, as well as my first experience with a boss like this. And I'm fairly certain that everyone feels the same way when I say Taboo can go suck it. The Subspace Emissary wasn't that difficult. There was a bit of challenge every now and then, but nothing on the level of the final boss. I will say that Taboo does work very well as a final boss, but that doesn't mean I approve of someone who can deck me in a nanosecond. The biggest problem I have with this guy is his ludicrous speed, which is only matched by his ridiculous power. He will teleport all over the place, and you only get a second to telegraph what attack is going to stomp you. 2 seconds tops. But I'm dancing around the main point. We all know why he's truly on here. It's his goddamn butterfly Deathwing attacks. I am confident in declaring these to be the most difficult attack to dodge in all of video game history. You can evade these, but you have to be absolutely frame perfect in order to do so. It's like threading the eye of a needle, but instead of using a piece of string, you're trying to thread your entire goddamn shirt sleeve. Both are technically possible, right? If you were to go over the Starfall playlist, you would have noticed a lot of unfinished series. Like, a lot of unfinished series. That's just one of the things about being such a small channel. When doing a series that clearly no one gives a shit about, it's better to abandon ship. Which honestly makes me kind of sad. If you guys want me to complete any of these, leave them in the comments below. But though I have to admit, I have completed some of these games in my free time. Phoenix Wright? Completed it. Loved it. Bleach Third Phantom? Completed it. One of my favorite games of all time. Superstar Saga? have not continued at all, and I really should. But sadly, I'm already aware of what is waiting at the end. Oh, am I ever. Superstar Saga is legendary. It wasn't Super Mario RPG, but it still has a great reputation for being revolutionary for the genre in general. Everything about it is pretty grand. All except the final boss, which is one of the worst things ever thought up. Seriously, Cackletta is a good villain for what she does in this game, but the final boss takes things way too far. You start out fighting the first ever boobified version of Bowser, which was already going to haunt my nightmares tonight, but then it decides to kick it up a notch by blowing you up, Bowletta eating you, and then waking up to fight against a boss you know nothing about with only 1 hit point. Why? Want to know what the clincher is? Unless you know this fight is coming and make yourself over-leveled, Cackletta's soul is going to attack you first, only made worse by the fact that destroying her heart is the only way to beat her, which is rarely exposed and has a pool of 1000 HP. Granted, that doesn't sound too bad compared to most RPGs out there, but allow me to tell you that is more than double of every other boss in the game. Thank God they fixed this in the remake, where you're still brought down to 1 HP, but at least gives you a chance to heal first. Glad they learned something at least. So, who's hyped for Pokemon Sword and... God, this countdown's out late. When I was writing this, we'd only seen the starters, Team Scorbunny, and bits of the region, and I got to say, it looks good. And now that it's actually out, I can't wait to play it. I have a lot of hope to see how Gen 8 fully comes out. Mostly because, if you remember, I'm hoping for this Gen 4 remakes. But one thing I hope is that Game Freak learns from the Let's Go and Ultra games. To be frank, the Ultra games piss me off. We could have gotten so much better than some refreshes that only put in stuff they were too rushed to put in the first ones. I am still infuriated about the lack of Megastones. What I really don't like about them is all the things they didn't fix and then made even worse. The tutorials still sucked, the Rotom boosts were unnecessary, they completely fucked over Lucamine's entire character. Am I forgetting anything else? Oh, right. There are many things I don't like about the Ultra games, and I'm sure many people will disagree with me, but can anyone give a good reason as to why we have a boss in this game that is 10 levels over what you are at the moment? Didn't think so. I mean, sweet son of Arceus, who at Game Freak thought this was okay? Ultra Necrozma is the biggest middle finger in the entire Pokemon universe right now. The same universe that has Mega Rayquaza! On top of having a 10 level bonus, every single one of his moves are likely to one-hit kill every single one of your Pokemon, with a special flair to increase his stats. Oh, and an extra fuck you to the person who gave him a Steel-type move to use against the Fairy types that would have been extremely helpful in this situation. I don't think anyone is going to complain if you keep this out of Sword and Shield. You know, the last thing I should be doing is talking about Undertale. After Undertale month, I shouldn't mention anything to do with this game for a while. But come on, it's kind of hard not to talk about stupidly difficult bosses and not mention Sans. This is a boss that will completely destroy you in a nanosecond if you lose focus. But as unfairness goes, I actually see Sans as justified. With everything that goes on in the genocide route, you need a boss like this to put you in your place. And besides, even if you don't agree with me, Sans is far more justified than... him.
I can do anything!
Good God, Toby. I love your work, but why? Why? Jevil is just ridiculous. He may not be as hard as Sans on intensity and power, but on the bullshitometer, he is way too extra. Let's start out by comparing the two bosses. Now, the biggest part that made Sans difficult, and kinda bullshit, was the removal of your invincibility frames. Jevil doesn't do that. You get far worse handicaps on you. One big problem is the main game mechanic of Deltarune. Now, I love the meter system that was introduced. It's a really unique mechanic that I'm excited to see expanded in the future chapters. But it also makes defending Jebel a pain in the ass. The best, and only if going pacifist, way of defeating him is to build up your meter to do special moves, which makes this fight feel excruciatingly long. Also, you have a total of 3 people to take care of and need all 3 awake and well to get through it. And his attacks can do some massive damage if you don't get the rhythm down. His bullet hell attacks are just
chaos.
But want to know what convinced me to put him on here over Sans? It's what happens when you check their stats. When you check Sans, it gives you the hint of can't dodge forever, just keep attacking. When you check Jebel, there is no strategy. It's one way to set a tone for a fight. Yeah, at least the music's good. Oh boy, here we go. The top 3, the creme de la crap of stupid difficulty. This is where it just gets ridiculous, where almost every aspect of the boss was made to be teeth-grindingly infuriating. And number 3 on this list is so obscure it's out of the goddamn boonies. Let's have a show of hands. How many of you know PacMan? That seems about right. Another show of hands. How many of you know about his 3D platforming games? Yeah, I thought so. Believe it or not, there is actually a trilogy of Pac-Man 3D platformers called Pac-Man World, and it's in the second game where we find this list's very inspiration, Blinky. Actually, saying that Blinky was the inspiration of this list is an understatement. I went through the trouble of researching and playing 9 other bullshit bosses and wrote a script just so I could have the opportunity to talk shit about this one boss. Everything about this fight is awful. Let's start with health. Pac-Man can take 4 hits before dying. Glide, Pinky, and Inky take 3 hits on some fancy dodging before they're defeated. Blinky takes 10 hits. 10! And it's not even easy to hit him. You can only deal damage to him when he reloads his fireball attack, which he spams very often in various different sprays, making it really hard to avoid. On top of that, Blinky has a habit of trying to ram you off the very tiny platform you're on. I've only had this game for about a year now, but I still haven't been able to beat him. I have died so many times that the game over screen has been seared into my mind. I would like to see the end of this game someday. I find it amazing how Nintendo games can dominate almost any countdown topic. Granted, this list doesn't have as much Nintendo as my other lists or possible lists I'll make in the future, but regardless, Nintendo is very good with variants, even when it is absolute bullshit. It also shows up in games you wouldn't expect. I haven't been able to play Splatoon, but my god I want to. Leave it to Nintendo to make a post-apocalyptic shooter game as bright and colorful as possible. And also, not all that difficult from the looks of it. But then we have Splatoon 2 and the Octo expansion, and fuck this. For the love of the Zapfish, what the hell is this? Credit goes to my boyfriend for showing me this, because this has got to be the most bullshit boss fight to ever come out of Nintendo. At least for now. I haven't personally fought against them, but just looking at this chaos is giving me a migraine. Just like Blinky, every aspect of this fight is unfair. That being said, there isn't a lot to this fight. It's just a 1v1 against the most armored up Inkling ever in a 5-stage boss fight of pure inky hell. Stage 1 has Agent 3 attacking while using a jetpack and sending auto bombs after you. Stage 2 has these giant bubbles that cover the terrain and also work like shields, while sending even more auto bombs after you. Stage 3 has up to 4 auto bombs chasing you down at one time. Stage 4 has a missile launcher, and finally Stage 5 has them just cannonballing the area you are in, coating wherever they land with ink. And what do you get? Basic gun and basic bomb. But that's not even the biggest problem. The worst thing about this fight is the stage. It is way too small for this kind of bullshit. If it was a larger stage you were fighting on, this might be the most fun boss in the game. Instead, you're given a cramped shoebox that even a custom robo would say is too small. I get a game like Splatoon, which doesn't offer many difficult challenges outside of multiplayer, wants to give everyone a hill to climb, but next time, keep that hill under a 90-degree angle. The deeper we have gone into this list, the harder it is to justify these choices. Because opinions on difficulty change from person to person. I'm sure there are some people out there who see Kirby's epic yarn as hard, and others who can breeze through Battletoads without breaking a sweat. But there is one point I think we can all agree on. RPG bosses can certainly be bullshit. Especially traditional RPG bosses, which is why for the number 1 slot, we shall be looking at Shin Megami Tensei. Now, I never knew about these games until Persona 5, and looking at them now, they seem pretty cool. Up until you see the Demi-Fiend as a thing that exists, I want nothing more to do with them. So, Digital Devil Saga is one of the spin-offs of Shin Megami Tensei, similar to Persona. And a fun thing is that the protagonist of SMT3 is in Digital Devil Saga as a super boss, which is kind of cool. But then you see how the Demi-Fiend, which is what he's called in this game, is the biggest amount of bullshit in any video game ever. Seriously, you should only fight this thing if you feel like punishing yourself. They gave the Demi-Fiend everything to make the player feel equivalent to a turd in the wind. Like, first off, in Digital Devil Saga, you can equip some special skills that can normally negate the Demi-Fiend's attacks. But if you do that, you'll die instantly on the first turn. He has 6 powerful demons he can summon and will always have 2 of them at his side. A health pool of 18,000 that will be fully restored, halfway decreased, and of course the infamous move Gaia Rage, that deals anywhere between 3,000 and 30,000 damage in a game where you max out at 999. You do the math because I know my gay ass can't. This guy requires so much patience and most importantly luck to get through it. And the last fun little Easter egg that rubs salt in the wound is the music playing in the background. It comes from Nocturne, the game the Demi-Fiend is from, but it's his standard battle music, meaning he sees you as an average, everyday random encounter. What did we do to deserve this? All I can hope is in the future we keep this shit in the toilet where it belongs.